Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Professor Fleming here with the third in a series of lectures on change management for sustainability. And today we're going to look at Barrett's whole change methodology, which is based on the 7 levels of consciousness. So I recommend you watch the previous video before watching this video. So this diagram should look in some ways very familiar to you because essentially Barrett is using integral theory to organize change practices and change processes. So for example, we know that change occurs when individuals begin to change their values or beliefs. And I hate to say it, but sustainability for many people is a belief, although it should be more than that. And as those beliefs begin to change, as people become interested in sustainability, they begin to change their own actions or behaviors. What could that be? What would be some examples? Might be they might call a meeting to talk to other people about sustainability, or they may begin to group into a larger set of people who have the same set of shared values about sustainability, and then all of a sudden the collective values begin to shift in a company organization. And eventually, over time, the actions and behaviors of the collective can begin to change, meaning that we go from a company that destroys the environment to a company that actually replenishes the environment while still retaining a profit. So some of the examples of changes is that companies will rewrite their policies and procedures to encourage sustainability. They will reward people for doing those things that are probably going to be helpful. You'll see companies all over the world right now changing their manufacturing processes to reduce pollution. These all result as hopefully a change of values, of beliefs of the individual. The reality is, so that I'm not accused of propaganda, is that a lot of the changes in companies actually come from the outside, meaning pressures from government or code or regulation. But remember, those changes in the government that are forcing the changes in the company are coming from somewhere. They're coming from other individuals who've decided that sustainability is the way to go. So ultimately, what we want to do is look at how we change the values and beliefs of people. We can look at companies changing their disposal processes, and then of course rewards are aligned with sustainability. So for example, in my university we started giving awards to groups instead of individuals. That way we could encourage collaborative behavior. So this diagram, I think I would probably rework it a bit to talk about external influences changing actions and behaviors. But remember, the thing can work backwards. So as the government, say the government is right here and they begin to force changes here, the whole thing can work backwards. So for example, I've seen where the LEED rating system has been imposed on a set of companies, say builders and architects, and pursuing LEED has changed the way that people think ultimately about sustainability and have them maybe wanting to do more on their own. So here's an example of how this thing works. So we have a typical design education situation where the design studios are based on a self-driven exploration of design. So the values there are not about service to society, but actually about personal exploration. And that leads to design in isolation. So I'm really frustrated by a lot of design schools that actually ignore the context, and not just the architectural context, but the context in general within which their projects sit, because that would inhibit the design process. Ultimately, there is a sense of collective pride in design programs that leads to or pushes the drive for self-centered design so we can get the most beautiful projects. And right now the grading and the award system reinforces the desire for a self-centered design process. Trying to get to sustainability in this model is actually really impossible. And so what we're doing now in our university is rethinking the way that we drive towards sustainability in the design process. So we look at empathic sensibility, and here's where empathy comes into the design process. I try to understand the perspective of others. I am equal to other team members, and I work towards the greater good. These are the values that we're trying to instill in the students as they move forward in their design process. That's really different than what we've been seeing before. If we look over here about working effectively across cultures, I am aware of how my actions and reactions express my values. So when you're in a group setting and you don't like someone because, well, maybe you're racist or you're prejudiced, you show that in the way that you look and talk to people. And so we're trying to change not only the way we think, but our daily behaviors. Can we make eye contact? Can we show respect for people? And can we build a diverse and inclusive culture for design? So we believe that a diverse, equitable learning community is a key element of a strong learning culture. So if you have group projects where one person dominates the group for whatever reason, you're not going to have a great design project, number one, and you're not going to have an inclusive experience. And finally, can we collaboratively develop clear mission and vision statements together? And that seems to be a very effective way in the group, is to start with that, and then collaboratively develop clear policies and procedures, so that if I am a university developing curriculum, I'm shifting away from individuals designing projects in isolation to groups of students designing projects within a context. So all of the projects that we have in our program are actually client driven. So the students are always exposed to the stakeholders in a project that might change the way we think or change the way they think. Now, this diagram might appear to be confusing in the beginning, but this is all about aligning our values with our stated behaviors. So let's just look here. This is me. I'm the individual, and I say that I believe in recycling. Then my action should be about recycling. Or I have a company or an organization has a set of beliefs that say we believe in sustainability as a company, and then you look at their missions and their activities and they don't follow. And one of the big problems we have right now in pursuing sustainability is what's called structural misalignment. That's a misalignment between what the company says and what it does, or a misalignment between what the company is saying and what the actual individuals believe in the company. So you can come down from the top saying we're going to be sustainable, and if the individuals in the company do not buy in, you're going to have structural misalignment and frustration. I can say this is what I spend most of my time working on in my career, is trying to build a structurally coherent system so that all of our stated values align with our actions and our everyday behaviors, which is very tricky. And so I'm sure all of you recognize these things in your own workplace. You just haven't probably seen this terminology. And so you can see that integral theory has been very useful to understand that, when you have a misalignment between a person and their behaviors, you can have a real problem at the structural level of the company, and then ultimately people get fired. So if you think about somebody getting fired, they're either not following the rules, but probably they're not following the rules because they don't have belief in the system. So just a couple examples of how we can begin to align behaviors and our stated values, our beliefs. So this is a statement by a group. Resource conservation is important, or by an individual. Rob recycles everything. Would that be considered alignment or misalignment? I would say yes. Here we have a relationship between stated values and behaviors that is pretty direct. How about another one? Physical plant or facilities puts recycling bins everywhere around campus. Students throw banana peels in the bins. If you know anything about recycling, that's not a good thing at all. And what we have here is a misalignment between our stated values and even some of our collective actions and the individual values of people within that system. So here we're seeing opportunities now for education, and in order to get students to understand the bigger picture and to begin to think about sustainability at a bigger level. Connection with nature is crucial. Rob drives an SUV very far to hike and climb. Hiking and climbing sounds good, and yet I'm driving an SUV to get there. That sounds like a misalignment. So what we're looking for in these structural systems is alignment at all scales between groups and individuals, between individuals and their actions, and between other groups and their actions. University sets aside money from energy savings for a green fund. Students use the green fund to divert stormwater at Seed Center. That's our building. That's pretty good. So what happened at our university is we decided that we could collect money from energy savings and divert it over to a fund for students to build projects that will then create more savings for the university. So this is where you get a closed loop or a virtuous cycle towards sustainability. So sustainability has a momentum. If you can begin to build processes and procedures that reinforce the overall process, you're going to be in better shape. So here we have what's called alignment and unity, which is pretty exciting.